Hey, hey, hey! Thanks again for pressing play. Welcome once again to another edition of the Suns Jam Session Podcast, the original post-game podcast on Planet Orange, shooting the shit about the Phoenix Suns since 2019. My name is John Voida, managing editor of Bright Side of the Sun. You can follow me at Darth Voida on the Twitters if you like to hang out on the Twitters. If you don't like toxic shit, then don't follow me at all there because you're not on there and you're smart. Kind of like my co-host, Matthew Lissy. Matthew, when's the last time you were on Twitter?
Yesterday, because I guess I got kicked from our chat and there's fantasy basketball going on. I kind of got to get back in there. So yesterday I was back on there, but I was trying to sign into mine. I couldn't get in. I'm like, I'll do it later. So it was giving me trouble. I'm like, I'll do it later. But yeah, never on there that much. But happy Friday, John.
Amen.
Sorry to say it because I hate when people say that, but happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We don't have a case of the Mondays. It's actually kind of funny because in our group chat for our fantasy basketball league, everyone's like, what's wrong with Matthew? Is he okay? Did somebody say something to upset him? Where did he go? It's like, A, Matthew never comments in here because B, he's never on Twitter. And so I reached out to you and you're like, yeah, it must have booted me just due to inactivity.
I think it did. Yeah, I was inactive for about 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the right way to approach it. You're like, the season's done. I don't need this in my life. I'm going to put this away. I'm going to compartmentalize it because it's been like 150 days since the Suns last played, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's understandable why you put it down. But for those of you who can't put down the Twitter, maybe you're watching the podcast there. Thanks for doing so. Make sure you head over to our YouTube page, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscription. Maybe you turn on the bell notifications that'll let you know when we go live, which is after every Phoenix Suns game. But as we prepare for the start of the season, we're kind of coming on sporadically at different days and times. Just to give you that great Phoenix Suns content that we're excited to talk about because there's always something fun to talk about. And we're going to get to some of those things on this episode. Yes, our division previews are coming to an end. We're doing the Northwest, and then we're doing the Pacific Division, obviously the home of the Phoenix Suns. It's going to be interesting to see what our takes are on the teams around the Suns in this division, as well as where we are going to have these teams seeded in our predictions. So make sure you stick around for that. And, of course, we'll talk a little bit about those NBA Cup courts. Right, Matthew?
Yeah, those things, they calm down a little bit, but they're still kind of just crazy. You know, I was thinking, I mean, we'll have comments on that, obviously. But the West, man, I'm excited to get into this because we got our toes wet last pod. Now we get to dig right in and share the rest.
Yeah, we definitely
the rest of our bracket.
We definitely did the worst of the three divisions in the Western Conference in the Southwestern Division last time. So we got that out of the way. So make sure you stick around and watch and listen to us talk about our predictions and our takes on these other Western Conference teams. If you don't have a beer in front of you right now, you are wrong. It's Friday afternoon, man. Crack it open if you got it. And let's talk some basketball, baby. So we're right here on the Suns Jam Session podcast to take you into happy hour and talk some Phoenix Suns stuff along the way. And you know I'm going to ask this.
Matthew, I've got to ask.
There's a couple traditions annually that occur every year. The City Edition reveals, ever since 2016 when Nike took over, we know that before the season begins, right before the season begins, there's leaks and there's confirmations relative to what those City Edition jerseys look like. This is the second year of the NBA Cup, or the in-season tournament, as we called it last year. So, Matthew, I got to ask, the courts have been revealed across all of the NBA. What's your take on this court right here?
It's not as bad as it was last year. And last year, they kind of warmed up to me a little bit as the year went on and as more games were played on it. But I do think it looks like someone did kind of throw up on it still. It's just so random, man. It's honestly, it looks like one of those editors. Like if you go to play 2K and you get to edit your own court, and you're just kind of mixing and matching stuff. That's exactly what it looks like. It's not a finished product yet, but you're just kind of throwing stuff on there to see how it looks like the PHX, the orange circle behind the actual trophy, and the gradient too that's on the bottom. It just kind of looks like a lot of stuff just thrown on there, man, and just like, hey, this is it. Like I don't understand. I wish they would actually have a documentary about the process of making these courts in the jerseys. I would totally watch that just to get their point of view. Maybe we'd like it a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree that this looks like somebody went to the designers of all of the NBA Cup courts, because all of them have a similar look, just like last year. For those of you who don't remember last year's abomination of courts, which I can officially say now that I've seen this, because you're right, Matthew, this is better. But an abomination of courts last year had that purple stripe running right down the middle. It hurt to look at. I had the El Valle in the middle, which I thought was a pretty nice touch. But outside of that, everything else just looked bad about it. Every court now has a primary color as a big circle going from 3.3 line to 3.3. Oh my gosh, 3-point line to 3-point line. Why can I say that? It's got to be the beer.
3.3.
So going from line to line, and then another larger, more opacitized circle behind that. And then it's got the PHX kind of faded in the background. It's a lot of orange. It feels like they went to the guy who's responsible for that like a week ago. They're like, hey, man, you almost cool with those courts? He's like, yeah. Oh, shit. And he just went real quick. And he's like, circle, faded logo, done. Bob's your uncle. I'm out of here, right?
Yeah, it's just like, oops, I forgot about it. Hold on, let me just 20 minutes get it done for you.
Like, fuck, if I'd only been on Twitter for the last 100 days, I would have known this was coming. No one, we DM'd you on Twitter like 17 times, dude. You didn't get it. He's like, yeah, man, I just, you didn't get my response. Shit.
Do we know the prize though? The winner, like, what are they getting this year? Do we know anything about that yet?
It's probably like $100,000. Like,
is it still just money?
Year.
Okay.
Probably. And if the Lakers win, they'll hang a banner for it for some stupid.
Yeah, that's the
reason.
thing. Yeah, I mean they did win it. They surprised a lot of people by winning it early in the season. Obviously, the tournament that
the
they had all
highlight
the energy
of their
for.
season.
Yeah, and then after that, kind of fell off. So to kind of measure it against that, I'm excited to see like how teams perform during it and they win it, and then how they actually, if they fall off or they continue to actually have a good season. So that's what I'm kind of measuring against.
Yeah, and again, it's the concept of the NBA Cup is something that I do like because it generates engagement. It created for fun content for us last year because we were watching point differentials to see which teams could get in, because the Suns were the 4th out of 4 teams in the Western Conference who got in last year because they went 3-1, but they did it with point differential. So it did matter, and it did have, I forget what team we were playing, but at the very end, like, we're chucking up shots, trying to make it happen, simply because we knew that point differential was going to matter. So it is something that's engaging. I wanted to go as far to say it's really exciting. It's almost more troublesome than anything, because if you're sitting at a bar and let's say you're at Zips and you got some, some of those golden medium wings, which are just so delicious when you dip it in that blue cheese. Drums preferably, but you can't order drums or flats there. They just give you both. But you have one of those and somebody kind of looks at you and they go, what's up with the court, man? And then you're like, well, that's the in-season tournament. Or this year, it'll be, that's the NBA Cup. They're like, what's that? And you're like, oh, fuck. And knowing me, I have to explain it to the best of my knowledge, but I've got wing sauce all over me.
Well, you can multitask, man.
I can.
Sure. I've seen you do it before with the wing sauce all over you. All over
yes.
your beard,
it gets like in the beard and such. I will say, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's what they're doing with these courts. It's just kind of like, they throw it out there. It just gets recognition, the courts, and also the jerseys too. It's just like, what the hell's going on here? I think it's just the time it takes for people to turn around and look at it. That's what they want. They want those kind of viewers to actually just spectate a little bit and kind of draw them in. Not all the time, but at least it gets some eyes on the TV. And
they ask, what is this? Because to your point, I remember watching an in-season tournament game last year, and I want to say it was like the Bulls, who had a very red court. And my wife walked in the room. She goes, what's going on here? I'm like, oh, it's the in-season tournament. She goes, what's that? And I go, well, it's this tournament in season. She's like, okay. And then she carried on. So, I mean, but it caught the attention of her eyeballs, and that's what they're trying to do. Yes. The one thing that I do like about this court is, as you mentioned, on the bottom of the court is that gradient, that valley gradient. I just think that's a cool look. I think that they should just kind of always have that on both ends of the court or something. I just think it looks kind of cool. But outside of that, this court looks like it's sponsored by CBS.
It does, yeah. It's like one of those promos, or like
Yes.
before the game when they're actually like showing the score, or the teams and matchups. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it just
Like the
looks like
little
the
slideshow they
CBS
have.
logo.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
See,
yeah.
you see the CBS logo in there? It's just like that
Yeah,
big
I do, yeah.
eyeball staring at you. And I
Okay,
wish
yeah,
I
now I
remember
see it.
the CBS football song. They all have a different one, but
I
I've
wish they had the
seen
gradient kind of bleed into the court too. Maybe that circle in the middle, but we still wouldn't like it.
no matter
Nah,
what, we would just go,
it's too
mid,
much.
and then come see us in November when these games begin. And we're like, it's all right.
Is
I
that
mean,
is that picture from 2K?
I think so.
It
It
looks
looks
kind of
like a
like it,
2K
yeah.
one, but every team had like this exact view, so they must have cycled through all the courts and released it.
I
And
think so
whoever,
too, because you can tell how like the seats are lined up. Like that's
yeah,
yeah,
100%. Like this is not the Suns arena. This is
yeah.
actually a digital representation of what the NBA court's going to look like. So that's all we got really relative to Suns news. There's been some Valley Suns transactions with the Austin Spurs. Jalen Shackelford, who we played during the summer league, is now going to be on the Valley Suns roster. But this is a Phoenix Suns podcast, not the Valley Suns podcast. So we'll just talk about him if he ever makes it to the Suns. Sound good?
Yeah, I'm
All
good
right.
with that.
Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, let's do what we came to do. Let's finish off these fucking divisions, Matthew. Starting with the Northwest Division preview. A quick reminder for everybody who is watching. Not only are Matthew and I talking about these teams, talking about the different transactions that occurred this offseason, understanding who and what is on their roster. A couple reminders. One, once we're done talking about the team, we're going to predict where they fall in the conference standings for the end of the year, because it's always fun to go back and take a look and see how wrong we were. And also, there's going to be a couple names on here who the information is just incorrect. It's fake news. There's going to be somebody who signed since I made these like 2.5 weeks ago, who is now with the team. And as much as everyone loves to be correct, you can let me know in the chat that I was wrong. I'm not going to acknowledge it because I know it's probably wrong too. Just deal with it. But a reminder of where we stand after our last episode when we did the Southwest Conference in the East, or in the Western Southwest Division in the Eastern Conference. I have the Mavs coming in the 5th overall, the Grizzlies in 7th, the Pelicans in 9th, the Rockets in 10th, and the Spurs in 13th. Matthew has the Mavs in 2nd, the Grizzlies in 3rd, the Rockets in 8th, the Spurs in 12th, and the Pelicans in 13th. Since we last spoke, Matthew, is there anything you want to change? Or are you good with where you're at?
No, I'm actually good. And I was looking at my standings. I feel like these are standings from maybe predictions last year too, just because a lot of these teams I have up top, it's like I kind of predicted last year to be good. You know what I mean? But we'll get to that obviously. But I'm very proud of my standings today.
Okay.
I woke up this morning. I'm like, you know what? I still like them. No changes at all. I didn't go into the Canva and edit it. Obviously, didn't share it with me. But
that's right. You can't touch this. Doom, 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 doom. Can't touch this. All right. Well, let's continue our previews. We're doing the Northwest Division, and we're going to start with the Portland Trail Blazers. So this is the Blazers, obviously a team that went 21-67 last year, last in the conference. Take that, DeAndre Ayton, bitching and moaning while he's playing with Hall of Fame level players. You go to fucking Portland and you lose, motherfucker. And that's exactly what happened. Again, 21 total wins for the Blazers last year. They have a salary cap of $170.3 million to work with this year, so underneath that first apron, but not very far underneath it. Looking at their starting 5, Scoot Henderson is the point guard. Anthony Simons is the shooting guard. Denny Advia, who came over in a trade with the Washington Wizards, is now their small forward. Obviously, they lost Malcolm Brogdon in that trade. They have Jeremy Grant as power forward, and their center is DeAndre Ayton. And they also added Devontae Graham and Bryce McGowens via free agency. Both were former members of the Charlotte Hornets. And with the 7th overall pick in the draft, they took Donovan Clingan, a big-bodied center. Looking at this team, Matthew, what are your thoughts on Portland this year?
The first thing I think about is this team would be great out east, right? I think a lot of these West teams would be, obviously, but this one would actually be a team where they can make the play-in tournament, or they can actually be an 8th seed, I feel like. Second is the actual pickup of Clingan in the draft was huge. I think a lot of us obviously looked at that as like, hey, DeAndre's about to exit and go to another team, maybe possibly be traded. that might not happen. But Klingon obviously is a good addition to this team. He's a guy that's actually opposite of Aiden. It seems like he actually plays with real force. But we saw that from Aiden too in college, where we saw him just dominate at times. Like, dude, this guy can actually, he has that motor at times. But obviously in the NBA, you have to kind of get that from other players to help him out. And those other players, like I predicted last year, was maybe Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons. They can push that guy. I mean, the head coach there having a hard time doing the same thing. So I think with Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, they're still young. They don't really have that kind of leadership. It's kind of nice to get Klingon there because he kind of matches their timeline. I think this is kind of DeAndre Ayton's exit from Portland at some time, maybe the season or the next offseason. But it's still just a young team that's going to be fun. Like last year, I really was excited to watch this team play. And just the expectations weren't very high. But Anthony Simons, Scoot Henderson, I was really big on Scoot. I think those guys will have good years this year. I'm still on Scoot Island. A lot of people kind of moved off of it. But I think this guy can be pretty decent in the NBA. When he came out into the NBA, I was all over this guy, but we'll see. His second season, it might be a little bit better, but it's still not enough out west, right? I mean, out west, who are they going to go? Who are they going to move in front of? It's just too tough. So that's why I have them at 15, man.
So you're having them repeat as 15th overall seed.
Yeah, and it's weird because I love that starting five. I really do, and especially the addition with Advia. Like, I love Danny Advia. So him on that team, a little bit older than those other guys, but he's still a young guy. Like, I love the fact that they have that guy and Jeremy Grant. Maybe he finds his way out of there, but the timeline with Klingon, I like that team maybe in the next 2 years, but right now they're still the 15th seed.
Oh, the Blazers, the Blazers, the Blazers. A team that I feel has never really hurt our feelings. A team that I think we both are a fan of outside of Phoenix. I like their jerseys typically. Their City Edition jerseys, which say Rip City as per usual, just look nice. A clean jersey, if you will, clean uniform set. Yeah, this is a team that I'm with you. Like, I like that starting five. I like Scoot because I, too, am on Scoot Island. I knew that it was going to take some adjustment for him last year, and I think that he started to show adjustments being made at the back end of the season. He was on my fantasy team last year, so I was very clued into what he was doing, his injuries, his comeback, his lulls, and then ultimately at the back end of his season, he found some successes. You put him next to Anthony Simons. Now, like you said, you got Denny Advia, who I, too, am a big fan of. Jeremy Grant, kind of that X factor there, and the guy who's making a ton of money. And then DA at center. And I think that the drafting of Klingon it raised a lot of eyebrows around the league and here in Phoenix, because we were all like, well, hold on. Didn't you guys just trade for our $33 million a year center and DeAndre Ayton, who at the time of the trade had 3 years left on his deal? And that was going to be kind of the cornerstone guy. And it seems that they're just, the organization is taking an opportunity to go, you know what? If this guy ain't it, we've got a plan. And to your point on the timeline with Scoot Henderson, now with Klingon, who's only, a year behind him, you are kind of resetting that timeline. And this is going to be a prove-it year for DeAndre Ayton. He's making $34 million this year. He's going to make $35.5 next year. And then he's a free agent. So there's an opportunity for the Blazers, who currently possess his bird rights, to potentially sign him to another max deal and offer more money than anybody else can because of those bird rights. But my guess is they're going to go the other way, and they're going to really say, hey, DA, this is your year to prove it. You're a former number one pick. You talk a lot you just say a lot of things about, being motivated and wanting to execute. But when it comes down to consistency on the court, it just hasn't necessarily been there. But he had a great back end of his year too. So if that translates into this year, now you've got a team that's got a really good center in DeAndre Ayton and a great guy to back him up in Klingon, who's going to be a rookie and go through the growth that incurs. So there's a lot of opportunity for this team. But you bring up the best point of all, and that is the fact that this is a tough conference to navigate. And I don't know how Portland doesn't repeat as the 15th seed. As I look at all other teams, every team that I went through, I go, is this team better than this team? Is this team better than this team? At least in my projections. And every time Portland just kind of fell down to the 15th seed. So it's a team that has potential, but they also have potential to blow it up at any point during the season. Like you said, with Jeremy Grant, with potentially DeAndre Ayton, there's an opportunity where, take a look at the Lakers, for example. the Lakers could be sitting there and having a rough go of it and go, you know what? We got D'Angelo Russell, trade him to the Blazers, get in DA here for the next year and a half, and let's just see what happens and put AD at the 4. And there could be a lot of change. You just don't know. And because this team is so in flux, that's why I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to slot them in at number 15.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to hang your hat on a sociopath like DeAndre Ayton.
He's like, I'd be a good center, but I don't have a bed.
Yeah,
like, dude, you make $33 million. You can't buy a bed.
And good for him.
He's like, yeah, but I can't walk down the driveway. They're like, you make $33 million. You can't like have somebody pick you up.
You have a helicopter.
Yeah, have a helicopter
fly by.
So Godspeed, good luck up there in Portland.
Yeah.
We will be watching, and we'll see. Or who should we talk about next? Let's go with the Utah Jazz, right?
Get them out of the way.
Yeah, get them out of the way. A team that's the one thing I'll say about the Jazz this year is I'm really excited to see them because they've rebranded. The past 2 or 3 seasons, they've had that highlighter yellow as a primary color.
Yes.
And their colors were just yellow and black. And this year they chose, you know what, we're going to go back to that mountain blue, the mountain purple, the look of the 90s, and obviously a modern spin on it. So the Jazz this year are doing very much what the Suns did last year. And they're like, you know what, we're redoing our uniform sets, and we're going to do an homage to the old 90s look. We'll see if the team can follow suit. The Jazz last year started off hot. Everybody once again thought that this is a team that potentially could make a run into the playoffs. We thought that 2 seasons ago, and it didn't happen. They fell apart at the back end of the year. They ended last year with a 31-54 record. They have a salary cap of only $146 million right now. A lot of little moves along the way with them. They added in free agency Sviatoslav Mihajlovic from the Celtics. They got Drew Eubanks, I think that's how you say his name, from the Phoenix Suns. They got Oscar Tshiebwe from the Pacers. They traded for Russell Westbrook, but then they let him go, waived him. He's now a member of the Denver Nuggets. And they lost Chris Dunn via trade to acquire Russell Westbrook to the Clippers. In the draft, they draft Cody Williams at 10th overall, a guy that I know that you're a big fan of. Isaiah Collier at 29 overall, a guy who I was a fan of coming out of SC. And then Kyle Filipowski with the second pick of the second round out of Duke, a big name with a lot of weird things going on around him. Their projected starting 5, Keontae George in his second season running the point, with Colin Sexton playing the 2 guard, Lauri Markkanen at small forward, John Collins and Walker Kessler make up the lineup. So I'll go first on this one. The Jazz. I think that this is a team that's been on the precipice of making that next step for the past couple seasons. And they fall apart at the back end of the year because I almost feel like part of it is, no, we want to take another stab at the draft. They have a ton of draft capital. And, obviously losing Rudy Gobert, losing Donovan Mitchell allowed them to acquire said draft capital. And Danny Ainge is running the show there, and he's going, you know what? Like last year, 2 years ago, we started just a little too good, guys. Let's back it off a little bit. Let's get some playing time for the younger guys. Let's fortify the guys who eventually aren't going to be starters for us, but they're going to be our depth guys. And then let's go out in the draft and try to continue to build and kind of use that OKC philosophy of we've got a ton of draft picks. I like a lot of the talent that they have on their team. I think that they do have a challenge when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. John Collins, not a great defender. You're not going to get a ton of defense out of Colin Sexton. Keontae George, a great offensive talent. And it's a team that last year had the 30th defensive rating in the NBA. So I don't know how much they're going to improve in that capacity. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop them down the line a little bit. They're going to be the 14th seed, Matthew.
Well, you can throw them there for me too, if you would like, because that's where I got them too. Because like, where else are you going to put them? I love the fact that they are probably the best destination for Cooper Flag coming up in this year's draft.
They're such a Cooper Flag team.
Because everyone knows why. I'm not even going to say it, but obviously
he's going to Duke.
Yeah, and he's white and he's really good.
Oh, that.
So yeah, and he's gonna play for the Jazz. So I'm pretty sure he's gonna be on their team next year. And maybe you're like, okay, the Blazers are 1 seed ahead of them, but this team, I just feel like they do, like you said, they go through a stretch where it's like, oh, does this team have a chance with Markkanen? Maybe they'll win 5 or 6 games in a row, but then they just fall off and they head into the draft for the next year. And there's really not much to say about them unless you want to talk about the uniforms, which I absolutely love them too. So
I do too.
they do have that going for them. They got out of that weird kind of emo funk that they went through last year. So that came out of nowhere, and now they're moving on. And I think, honestly, this is a team that has the best chance with Flag, and that's where I predict him going to next year.
Yeah, and I think another factor in this for me is I take a look at just their division, the teams that they're going to be playing the most, and the next 3 teams that we're going to discuss are all top-tier teams. And they're going to take their turns just beating the shit out of Utah and Portland, and that's going to help in their standings. And Utah, this is a team that I could also see them making a deal at some point to potentially try to get some talent in there. They have assets, and they could maybe look in the mirror, and if the right asset presents itself, and I don't know, it could be like a Julius Randle, or could this be a destination eventually for Brandon Ingram, right? Like they take a swing on Ingram. Utah could do something. Yeah. They could do something kind of funky this year. Like we rebranded, we look different, we feel different. But to your point, they also could be in that Cooper Flag sweepstakes, and it doesn't benefit them to be good. So why do it at this point?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of teams we've talked about out east that are in that running for Cooper Flag, but I think that this is probably the best destination for him. And I really think if you're Utah, you kind of hold on to what you have this year just because of the talent out west. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to get Julius Randle or one of those other guys and just kind of suck. And those guys don't want to be in Utah. Like, I want to do that. I would start out young, get the guys in there from the draft and go from there, because that's the way you can get guys that want to play in Utah. And you just have to draft them, I feel like.
And they're building around Lauri Markkanen for sure. They just signed him to a 5-year, $238 million contract. So he's going to be there for quite some time. It's about who can they put around him to be effective. Yeah. And he's proven to be, I don't know if he's the top tier guy, but if you have him and you bring in Cooper Flag for a couple seasons and all of a sudden he starts to be something, this could be a very interesting team to watch moving forward. Yeah, but right now it's just not the time for the Utah Jazz.
Nope.
All right, well, let's talk about next the Minnesota Timberwolves, the team that ended the Suns' season last year. They are a second apron team with a $205.8 million payroll. One of the few teams, I think there's 4 or 5 teams that have the second apron, Suns included. They were 3rd overall in the Western Conference last year at 56-26. Looking what they did relative to their roster, they added old man Joe Ingles as a free agent from the Orlando Magic. They drafted Rob Dillingham with the 8th overall pick, who, spoiler alert, is going to be my pick for Rookie of the Year, and Terrence Shannon Jr. with the 27th overall pick in the first round of the 2024 NBA draft. They lost Monte Morris, who's now a member of the Suns. They lost Jordan McLaughlin, who's now a member of the Kings. And they lost via trade Kyle Anderson. Slow-Mo is gone. He is now in Golden State. And Wendell Moore Jr. And free agents that they still have out there include TJ Warren. So they're starting 5, Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. Tell me your thoughts on this year's version of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Matthew.
Man, there's so many ways we can go to start with this one. I feel like, it's an interesting run they had last year where Anthony Edwards, I've obviously had his coming out party in the playoffs, but also it's like a team where you're looking at the starting roster and the starting lineup, and a lot of people don't love it. I mean, they're too big, right? Karl Anthony Towns. He's a guy that a lot of us wanted traded from that team too. So the way I'm looking at it last year is like you can go a couple ways. So the playoff run they had is like that. Their only chance really they had to win a championship is like, because they were obviously after they beat the Suns, they were picked favorites to go to the finals. They were picked to win it all with Anthony Edwards by a lot of people, including Bill Simmons. Like those guys were like, oh, this is the team to beat. But obviously losing, it just makes you wonder is like, do they have enough to come back this season with Anthony Edwards and do it again? Because we just didn't count on those other guys around him. Obviously Naz Reid is a special 6-man.
Yeah.
Someone that every team would love to have that kind of guy on your team coming off the bench. But Anthony Edwards, he has a lot on his shoulders now, right? Didn't really follow up in the Olympics too. He had some good games, but I just feel like that whole Olympic run, he kind of was hidden. He didn't really fit as well as I thought he would. But he is kind of a guy that's still learning, right? He's still young. He's a guy that's going to go into next season and want to be the MVP of the year of the season. So having that coming off of what should have been maybe a finals run for them, it's a lot on Anthony Edwards. Can he hold up to that and have it on his shoulders through the whole season?
That's the question.
That's a big question. Honestly, I think he can. I think he can be a guy that definitely can hold that. But I feel like he had to come down just a little bit in that playoff run. He had to come out the other end of the feet. He had to be the guy that's going to be like, have to answer all the questions, which he loves to do. But it's like, can he do it with these guys, right? I hate that we always talk about Minnesota, and I hate the fact that I always go to trade. It's like, why can't you just love this team? But I just think it's going to be one of those things where it's like, how are they going to be by All-Star weekend before the trade deadline? If they have to make a move, do they make a move? Because they're going to have that same kind of force going into the playoffs that they had last year, where they're going to be feared. And I don't know if people fear them as much as they did last year, because they know how bad the Suns sucked. And when they swept them, it's like, yeah, of course he did. Carlton Towns had like the best playoff run he's ever had, obviously. And against the Suns in the sweep. But Anthony Edwards is going to have to hold his team on his shoulders, and I think he can definitely do it. But I just don't know, like, through the whole season, no. I would honestly normally say, like, hey, this is my MVP pick. But I'm not going to go there, dude. I think they have just kind of a decent season, a lot of ups and downs. It's like that's usually what happens to these sort of teams that are on a run, and they have to come back down to earth a little bit. I kind of think that's what happens this year. I could be totally wrong, but I do have them at my 6th seed, which is super low.
6th seed for Matthew. Okay. No, I think that's you make a lot of good points, and I understand what you're saying when it comes to the Timberwolves, because there's a lot of question marks. Mike Conley's 37 years old. Let's start there. So from a playmaking standpoint, now granted they're bringing in Rob Dillingham, where it's going to be exciting to see times when both him and Anthony Edwards are on the court, because there's going to be just unbelievable oozing of athleticism on the court. This was the team that had the number 1 overall defensive rating last year in the NBA. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that transfers over to this year, if it's applicable once again, if this is a team that has the ability to be a defensive powerhouse and to hold down in the same way that they did last year. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think that this team, I don't think that this team is nearly as potent as they were a season ago when it comes to that. I think that there are going to be weight of expectations, and I think Anthony Edwards is okay with that. I don't see that as a big X factor. I see issues with Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert, who literally was benched by his home country in France. They're in the Olympics, and he gets benched. Yeah. I mean, just from a psychological standpoint, that's got to say something. And he's getting older as well. Their depth is a little bit more compromised because they let some players go, Monte Morris included, although, he wasn't necessarily somebody who was a huge factor on that team. But Jordan McLaughlin added depth. Kyle Anderson was definitely somebody who was assisted. Joe Ingles is an old 3-point shooter coming off the bench. I just, again, they were the 3rd overall seed last year. This year, for me, they're the 4th. I think that they do have the talent, and they do have the ability to they're going to have a home playoff series, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I have them. I don't know. Like, I'm just going really opposite with a lot of these teams. It's going to be funny how it shakes out, dude, because we are totally opposite with our rankings. So it's going to be fun.
Well, the Eastern Conference was a hell of a ride. Well, let's talk about the Denver Nuggets.
Yes.
Over a year removed now from winning an NBA championship. They added in free agency Dario Saric from the Warriors and Russell Westbrook, who came over from the Clippers via the Utah Jazz. They drafted with the 22nd overall pick Deron Holmes, and they lost Jay Huff, Kadavius Caldwell-Pope to the Magic. Colin Gillespie is now a member of the Suns. They traded Reggie Jackson, a team that has a first apron tax restriction with $183 million salary. 57-25 last year, the 2nd overall seed. Now they have Jamal Murray starting at the point. Christian Brown is now their starting shooting guard. They have Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic. This is an interesting team for me, Matthew. The Nuggets, I feel like they're on the back end of their opportunity. They were a team that had talent for years and years and years and couldn't break on through. And then 2 years ago, they broke on through. They won their championship. And now they're kind of on the other side of that, where Michael Porter Jr., they don't necessarily know what they got in him. Somebody who contributed to a championship run, and you can never be frustrated with that if you're a member or a fan of the Nuggets, because you won a championship with this guy. But what is this guy? Jamal Murray, bad postseason, bad Olympic run, a slow starter every year. How long is it until you start to kind of worry what's going on with Jamal Murray? Christian Brown has had a great couple years in the league as a backup, but now he's going to be front and center with that starting shooting guard role, and could be somebody that opposing teams are going to start to try to pick on. What keeps this team relevant, what keeps this team competitive, is Nikola Jokic. I mean, he is a top 5 player potentially all time. To say he's top 10 isn't going overboard at all either. Just an amazing passer, amazing scorer, an amazing just cerebral player who understands the game, knows how to win in 13 different ways. He's hard as hell to stop. He led the entire Olympics in like points, rebounds, and assists. I mean, the guy's just ridiculous. He makes Aaron Gordon playable, because if like the Suns were to trade for Aaron Gordon, we'd be fucked, because that guy, he just can't play in our system. You need somebody to set him up time and again, and that's why him and Nikola Jokic have been such a good combination together over their few seasons playing together in Denver. So just due to their sheer talent, their ability to win, I do see some digression, but I have them as the 3rd overall seed, Matthew.
Okay. All right. Well, I went a little opposite here. So I'm not too big on them this year. Like you said, the back end of their success, it's really tough to say that, because it's like the Suns, right? I mean, we were right there in the finals and we kind of digressed over the years. We still have a good team, right? But you got to kind of build it back up. So I don't think they really built their team back up. I know they have like the best player in the NBA, Jokic. Yep. He did go in, he won the silver and the Olympics, which is nice. They did lose. Was it bronze?
Yeah, France.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, they won the bronze. He was celebrating, having a good time.
It was on Twitter.
What was on Twitter?
Him winning you missed it. You weren't on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. I just
bronze.
assumed he won silver and lost to the U.S. in the finals. Yeah, who knows what's going on out there in the Twitter world. So I think that he's obviously the better player in the world, obviously probably the best player in the world. But this team didn't, I feel like, build around him the way that they should have. They are coming off the back end, I think, of their success. But it's like they had the best players, so why wouldn't they be in the finals every year? I could just kind of see the same thing as what's going on with the Milwaukee Bucks, with Giannis and that kind of team. They have to get him a little bit more help. I can't really count on Jamal Murray. Michael Porter, too. They did win the finals, I know that, but now teams are figuring them out. They lost in the second round last year to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I can just see it as a year as where Jokic is kind of like a year off, maybe. I feel like the guy is obviously he's very competitive. And we see him with his horses and stuff in the offseason. He wants to be home. He hates it here in America. I don't blame him. I don't blame him for hating to play in the NBA. Just got to make that money, I guess, and it sucks. So I see it as a down year. I think is it okay to rebuild around him again? I think so. I just don't think they have the right pieces right now, and I don't know if I can count on any of those guys. So I'm definitely going to go a lot lower than you. I'm going to put them at the 7th seed this year.
7th
but
seed Denver.
You have to realize too, like the 7th seed, the 8th seed, like this is a 49 win. These are 49 win teams. Like the 49-50 win teams. I mean, it's not Suns, like the East where they have like 18 wins and they're in the 8th seed. So
yeah, the Suns were 49 game winners last year and they were the 6th seed. I mean, exactly. it's a great conference.
It's still a good season. It's just I feel like there's other teams that are hungrier than what the Nuggets are this year, and that's why they're going to be the 7th.
Okay, I don't hate any of this thus far, because your reasons are valid, and I could definitely see it. Like even as I'm sitting there talking about Denver, I'm like, God, have them 3rd. I'm just doing that due to legacy. I do think that this is a team that got worse, and that's a whole nother game we should have played along. This team get better, get worse, or stayed the same.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the next team and the last team in the Northwest Division. That's the Oklahoma City Thunder. They added in free agency Isaiah Hartenstein. They added via trade Alex Caruso. They drafted with the 12th overall pick Nikola Topic. Dylan Jones with the 26th pick and Jai Mitchell with the 8th pick in the second round. They lost Lindy Waters the third. They lost Josh Giddey. And their starting five is SGA, Jalen Williams, Lou Dort, Chet Holmgren, who's going to play the 4 now instead of the 5, and Isaiah Hartenstein. First overall seed last year with 57 wins, and they are under the first apron with a $162.5 million contract. Matthew, tell me your thoughts on the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Oh, I absolutely love them. They're my number 1 seed. I'll just get that out there right now. I think they have a guy in Jalen Williams that can be an all-star this year. It's nice to have Giddey off the team just because you want the ball in SGA's hands, and also Jalen Williams. I think that he can handle the ball just as well as any of them out there. So they don't have to split up that anymore with Josh Giddey. They got better, of course, at the center position with Hartenstein, which is always everyone's kind of predicting them as the best team in the West and the best team in the NBA, and they're going to be unstoppable. So I'm going to go along with that. I just think unless due to injury, this team's not. They're going to be the number 1 seed. They're going to win at least 59, maybe even 60 games this year. They had a great series against Dallas in the playoffs too. Like, I know it ended in 6 games, but they were right there, and they were one of my favorite. They were my favorites to get to the Western Conference Finals. I didn't think they had it in them to get to the NBA Finals, but this year I think they do. I think this is their year to get to the finals. Win it, I don't know, but they do have the most complete team in the NBA.
Well, I got a question for you, Matthew.
You know what time it is.
Trivia time.
When is the last time a team in the Western Conference repeated as the number 1 overall seed?
Thinking. I don't know. I'm just thinking the Suns in the 2004, 5, 6 years, or no?
No, sooner than that.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
that long ago.
Okay. One more. Golden State.
Yep.
About 6 years ago?
2015 and 2016.
Oh, okay.
They were the number 1 seed in
agree.
consecutive seasons. So it's not something that happens very often, is my point. And you have Oklahoma City being the first overall seed. I do as well. I see OKC, as you said, as probably the most complete team in the Western Conference. They have that youthful exuberance. They have the talent. They're going to They can beat you in multiple different ways, whether it's defensively, offensively, in transition, in a half-court game. A lot of what their roster does, in my opinion, is built for the regular season. We haven't done predictions, and we won't on this podcast about our end-of-year predictions. But I'll tell you right now, I don't have OKC in the finals because I don't think that they're built for success in the finals. I think that their free-flowing game is something that can be shut down in a 7-game series. And we saw that last year when they lost to the Dallas Mavericks. So still a first overall seed. Their depth is disgusting. Having SGA is just a code breaker because of the way he slows the game down. Although with the physicality that's being allowed, effective as of the All-Star break last year, that does slow him a little bit down, and he's not getting to the line as much. And I think that's something that could ultimately hurt them. But yeah, I mean, you're right. This is the team to beat right now in the Western Conference as the number 1 seed. And I think until we see otherwise, I agree with you there. So taking a look where we stand now after we've talked about the Northwest Conference. Northwest seeds, I have Oklahoma City at the 1st seed. I have Denver at the 3rd. I have Minnesota at the 4th. And then I have the Utah Jazz at 14 and the Portland Trailblazers at 15. You have OKC 1. The Timberwolves are 6. The Nuggets are 7th, and then 14 and 15 are the same as mine with Utah and Portland. If you're listening to the podcast, here's an ad. If you're watching the podcast, we're going to continue right on with what we're doing. Oh, welcome back, those of you who are listening and had to skip through ads. Let's go ahead and talk about our home division. We made it, the Pacific Division. Let's go ahead and just kick it right off with the Sacramento Kings. Team, lot of a movement, right? They were 46 and 36 last year, which was the 9th overall seed in the Western Conference. They have a salary cap of $170.9 million. They added in free agency Jordan McLaughlin from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Orlando Robinson from the Miami Heat. They added DeMar DeRozan via trade with the Bulls. They added Jalen McDaniels via trade with the Toronto Raptors, and then they drafted Devin Carter with the 13th overall pick. They lost in free agency Kessler Edwards, who's now with the Mavericks. They lost Alexander Viesenkov to the Toronto Raptors, as well as Davion Mitchell, who again came over in that Jalen McDaniels trade. They lost via trade Chris Duarte for DeMar DeRozan, essentially, and then they lost Harrison Barnes, who was there fucking, it feels like forever. He is now a member of the Spurs. Starting five, you know him well. It's De'Aaron Fox. It's Kevin Huerter. They now have DeMar DeRozan. You got Keegan Murray. You got Domantas Sabonis. Break down this team, Matthew. Break down the Sacramento Kings for everybody.
So the Kings they're back, baby. I think they're definitely back, and I think the reason is they got that run stopper, man. They got the DeMar DeRozan, man. He's a guy that can actually slow things down, hit some big shots. Because what did you see last year? They kept blowing like 40-point leads almost every team. We were there one game where they were up, I think 21 with like 6 minutes left.
Brightside night, 22-point comeback.
Yeah, and they came back, and it was just a normal thing for the opponents to actually come back. No lead was safe. And what the Kings are doing right now, man, they're just continuing to ride that team with De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, who I absolutely love, Domantas Sabonis. He just needs those other guys around him. He's obviously not the most dominant center, but he's good for a Kings team. They needed that one piece. I don't know if it was DeMar DeRozan or not, but they definitely needed one more piece last season. That's why I didn't predict him to do anything. Now I think they have a good enough piece to where he's a run stopper, can hit some shots next to De'Aaron Fox, which is perfect. And they're coming back, dude. They're going to have an incredible year. I'm picking them as a number 3 seed.
Number 3 seed for the Sacramento Kings? It's impossible. You have the Grizzlies in there.
Oh, number 4 seed then, buddy.
Hello, friend. I have them.
I got 2 number 3 seeds.
They're tied. I have the Kings slotted in as the 6th seed. I think that they're going to be better than the Grizzlies. I think that they're going to be a little bit worse than the Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and that's why they kind of ended up landing there for me. But the second best team in the Pacific Division, in my opinion, I just gave away my number 2. Oh, and no, I didn't, because I didn't give away my number 2 yet. But I really think that this team they have the offense. That's for sure, and that's going to help them a lot. Their defense is somewhat suspect and continue to be suspect. DeMar DeRozan's not getting any younger, but I think he's going to be a nice breath of fresh air, because before in that position you had Harrison Barnes, who was hit and miss and was mostly miss the past couple seasons. And now you have somebody who's going to add another layer of that offense to them. It's going to add that mid-range game that they really haven't had. They've been an inside and 3 kind of team. And I'm just excited to see the Kings, and maybe it's a little bit of bias because I'm not, I don't hate the Kings. They're probably the only team in our division I don't hate because they never really hurt my feelings. And I think a 6 seed isn't out of reach for them, especially when I take a look at the west of the Western Conference and how I think they stack up against those teams. Another one of those teams in the Western Conference over there in the Pacific Division, the Los Angeles Lakers. As you can see, they didn't do fucking shit this offseason.
No, they did not.
They're a second apron team with $190.5 million salary cap. Although I think since I made this graphic, they might have dipped into the first apron by releasing somebody. They drafted Dalton Nicked with the 17th overall pick, and then they wasted a fucking pick by getting Bronny James. Good for you. Enjoy that drama all season long. They needed microphones to be around the Lakers because they're the Lakers, and they like microphones. They're not going to earn them this year. They lost Spencer Dinwiddie and Taurean Prince. They're starting 5, D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, LeBron James, Rory Hachimura, Anthony Davis. 8th overall seed last year for the Lakers. I don't see the Lakers being anywhere near that 8th seed this season. I have them. I got to, hashtag checks notes. Let's see here. I have them as the 12th seed. I have them dropping out of the play-in. I don't see it with the Lakers, in all honesty. This is a team that I said the same thing last year. They reminded me so much of the Hawks in the Eastern Conference run a few seasons ago, where everyone's like, the Hawks have made it. I'm like, no, the Lakers went to the Western Conference. They got swept in the Western Conference by the Denver Nuggets. Everyone was just lining up to suck them off on how amazing it was. That was the best sweep I've ever seen. And then they end up last season playing like shit and being the 8th seed. And that's with a peak Anthony Davis season and with a productive LeBron James season. That's hard to replicate, especially with LeBron being 40. Nothing else has changed on this team. Nothing, and they're going to be better or can be competitive. They're not. They're going to be the worst team in the Pacific Division. That's right, the Los Angeles Lakers. Yeah,
it's all about Bronny and stats this year for LeBron. So that's his focus. Maybe he can. I think LeBron has a few more years after this. Maybe he can jump on another team after, but I think he wants to spend his first year, obviously, with his son, maybe a couple games early in the season, get it out of the way. Maybe he can go to the G League after, because I feel like that's what's going to happen. And it needs to happen, and they need to get that game over with, I think, in the first week. Otherwise, it's going to be the news for forever.
Oh,
That's what they
God.
want, all eyes on LA. I do love the fact that this is the second year I think it's going to be over for the Lakers not making the playoffs, because I do have them at a number 11. Last year I predicted them not to make it. This year again, and I'll probably be proven wrong again, but I just don't think they have it in them. It's either one of the two LA teams. I'll give away my other one, but one of the two LA teams who's going to have the better record. I know Bill Simmons was talking about it. He said the Clippers, and you can kind of just see that, but it's just such a gross thing to think about, those two teams going head to head. Who's got the best records? Like, I don't want to watch either of those teams play.
Yeah.
I just don't.
The only reason I
the
want to
new
watch
arena, I want to see the wall filled with the other teams.
Exactly.
Fans.
I just want to see the poor security guard trying to kick out a fan of the other team.
Exactly. Yeah,
You know, and like the guys,
Pictures he
that
got
security
on.
guard's going to lose his job because Ballmer's going to be sitting there, be like, I saw the Phoenix Suns fan sitting there. That security guard, he's out of here.
Yeah.
We need stability. He's going to run it like a drill sergeant. And
Halfway
that takes
through,
us
yeah.
right into our next team, which is the Clippers. They have James Harden, Terrence Mann, Kawhi Leonard, Derek Jones Jr., and Ivica Zubac as their starting five. They were the 4th seed overall last year because they had that amazing run that lasted from about January to March, where they were just putting teams away, but it was not sustainable. They added Derek Jones Jr. in free agency, as well as Nicholas Batum and Mo Bamba, who both came over from the 76ers. They traded for Chris Dunn. They lost via trade Russell Westbrook, and then they lost Paul George, who went to the Sixers, Mason Plumlee, who's here in Phoenix, Daniel Tice to the New Orleans Pelicans, Brandon Boston Jr. to the Spurs, and Musa Diabate to the Hornets. And one draft pick came in the second round, 16th overall pick, Cam Christie. That's about it. So this is a team that definitely got worse this year, Matthew. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility to say that this team, too, will not make the playoffs. And in my opinion, they don't. They're going to be the 11th seed.
Yeah, they're going to have good stretches this year, but it's just a lot of drama around James Harden. I love Terrence Mann. I love the fact that he's still there. It can maybe be a future bright spot for that team, but right now with Kawhi and James Harden, it's just too much drama for them to really focus on winning. The new arena and stuff, it'll give them some energy. I feel like they do start off pretty hot, probably a top West team, probably the first maybe month, but then they kind of fall back down to earth due to injuries, due to James Harden just not kind of holding up. It sucks because I do like Mann a lot, and I wish he would move teams. But maybe James Harden does ask for another trade, and he's off the team, and then he can just have the Clippers.
That's very true. That's very true.
In that case, then the team might play a little bit better. Yeah, I have them at number 10. So they're making the play-in. I had to choose between one of the two LA teams. They're making the play-in.
Yeah, I say that they're both out in this instance. Only 2 teams left. We've got the Golden State Warriors up next. Salary cap, $177.8 million, so they're just under that first apron. 10th overall seed last year was Steph Curry, Pods, Brandon Podziemski is their starting shooting guard without Klay Thompson this year. Malik Beasley is their small forward. Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green. They added via free agency D'Anthony Melton. They added Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson and Lindy Waters via trade. They lost Klay Thompson, as I mentioned. They lost Dario Saric. They lost Chris Paul, who I spelt with 2 L's on this. Oh. And they drafted Quentin Post with the 22nd pick in the NBA draft. So, I mean, the Warriors, for me, I have them in the 8th overall position. And this one is purely because I think that Steph has got one last great year left in him. And I think that the Warriors are going to do some things this season that are going to put them in that position, number 8th overall, because this is going to be a team that's going to try to make some trades. This is a team that's they're going to shuffle some things up. You got Kuminga coming off the bench. You got Moody. You have guys who are desired by other teams. They could come in and play well for the team and have an impact that could help propel them to 8, or those could be utilized in transactions that's going to fortify things as much as they can around Steph. I truly see this as a team that's going to be kind of hang around 500 until the All-Star break or until the trade deadline. I'm sorry. And then once the trade deadline hits, boom, they're going to make the big splash. They're going to try to go all in on somebody to try to make it happen around Steph Curry. And again, when you take a look at who I have just right below them, I got the Pelicans just below them. I got the Rockets just below them. Either just blow them. Either one of those teams could be better than the Warriors. I understand and accept that, but I'm just going to go ahead and slot them into 8th in this situation.
All right. Yeah, I love that because obviously I have them at number 9. I didn't have them as my number. I got left 5. Yeah, number 9. For the same reasons, I think that Steph Curry has a couple good seasons left in him, but they're just going to have to mix and match with this team because I don't feel like even Dunleavy being the GM now, I feel like he's made a good couple moves to kind of get the team in good position to make a big move by the trade deadline because that's what he's going to have to do. You want to keep a guy like Steph Curry happy, and obviously they have this long time to this point, and he has a few more years there in Golden State. He probably will never go anywhere else. But I definitely think that this is going to be a decent year. They just kind of cruise to the playoffs and see what they can do in the play-in.
All right, one more team left. We've made it. Team 30 out of 30 for us. The Phoenix Suns. All right, highest payroll in the fucking NBA. Go Suns, baby. $223.6 million. We won 49 games last year, 6th overall seed. A lot of movement, which is something that we didn't know if it was going to be able to happen. Like, you look at the Lakers and you go, you know what? They didn't do shit. And we thought that's what the Suns were going to do. We weren't going to be able to do much. We're going to okay, let's bring back all the guys who were on player options last year and, let's just roll it back again, see what happens. Well, we lost some players. We lost Drew Eubanks with the Jazz. We lost Eric Gordon with the Sixers. We lost David Roddy, who we traded to the Atlanta Hawks. Udoka Azubuike's gone. Thaddeus Young's gone. Isaiah Thomas is gone. Saban Lee's gone. Ish Wainwright is gone. We added via free agency Mason Plumlee. We added Tyus Jones. We added Monte Morris. We added Colin Gillespie. We drafted Ryan Dunn. We drafted Oso Ighodaro. And now we have Tyus Jones at the point, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker playing the small forward, Kevin Durant at power forward, Yusuf Nurkic playing the center. Matthew, tell the people about your Suns.
Oh, my Suns are very cheesy. They don't give a fuck about the regular season. No, I'm just kidding. But actually, I kind of do believe that a little bit. I do think that they kind of have that, this regular season doesn't matter. It's going to be interesting to see how this team really starts the season. Obviously, it's going to be a big build up to the season starts. They have a lot more. They have great pieces around them. They have great guard additions. They have same guys in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant that can lead this team, obviously in scoring. But it's just about that edge, man. It's about the edge if they want to continue to move up the standings and prove to other teams and prove to the fans that the season does matter. And obviously last year it did matter, and they kind of just blew it off. So the fact that they did that kind of hurt me last year. So I don't think they're going to improve or do much better this year in the standings wise. But if you're going to talk about just the attitude wise, I think it's going to be a lot better. I just think the competition out west this year is a lot better. And that's why I still have them at number 5 this year. They were 6 last year, but I'm going to put them in the 5th spot just because I just think they're going to have that edge towards the end of the season. And I think towards the All-Star break, they're going to start getting things going with that team as long as there's no injuries. But the West is just so good, man. So they still have to find themselves while a lot of these teams already know who they are.
So you got the Kings better than the Suns this year.
Yeah, record-wise, yeah.
All right. Well, if you're watching along live, you can see the big board, and I'm moving the Phoenix Suns right into that number 2 overall seed. And perhaps I'm a homer by doing so, but I truly think that this team is built to win. I think that this team is underrated, and no one's given them their just due for all the moves that we just mentioned. Take a look at what this team did. James Jones really made an attempt to fortify this team and address the deficiencies that we ran into last year. Okay, what were those deficiencies? We lacked playmaking. Boom. We got Tyus Jones and Monte Morris. We had turnovers at inopportune times, especially in the fourth quarter. Boom. Again, Tyus Jones, Monte Morris. We needed some athleticism and some defense. Ryan Dunn, hi, how you doing? I know you're a rookie, but you're going to have an opportunity to potentially play on this team. We needed a better backup center than we had. Drew Eubanks versus Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee wins that argument, in my opinion.
Yes.
So looking at the Suns and who I think they're going to be this year, I honestly think that they're going to catch some teams by surprise. I think that having a stabilizing playmaker is so invaluable to this team that it's going to do wonders for Bradley Beal, for Devin Booker, for Kevin Durant. And if and when injuries occur, I feel like there's appropriate members on this team who can step in and fill the gaps for 5 to 10 games here, 15 games here, or sporadically. You have some depth on this team that, again, not a lot of people are giving the Suns credit. No, last year was the same thing. Last year, a lot of people said the Suns don't have depth. And I stood here on the podcast, and by stood, I mean sat right here in my little studio office. And I said, no, there's depth. We just have to give it a chance. I'm saying the same thing. I'm being rope-a-doped into it again. I honestly understand and believe that and can accept it. But at the same time, I take a look at the standings and I take a look at the teams. I think they're better than Denver this year. I truly do. I think that they're better than Minnesota. I thought that last year. I just think that team was in a weird place at a weird time when that playoff series occurred. I know they're better than Dallas. I know they're better than Sacramento and Memphis and Golden State on down the line. The only team I don't think that they're better than, in all honesty, and that's how I built out my rankings. I started alphabetically and I just put a team down. And then I'd come to the next team. I go, well, is that team better than this team or worse than this team? I put that team down. And then I kind of went down and I was like, okay, these are my standings. And when it came to the Suns, I was like, there was only one team I'm not sure about whether or not the Suns are better than, and that is the Oklahoma City Thunder at this point. So it's preseason. It's the time of predictions. And these are it. These are our final predictions. So any thoughts on what I said, Matthew, before I read off our predictions?
No, I definitely love it. I was totally opposite because I just don't know what to think from this team. I do see a lot more in the teams, obviously, above the Suns, and including the Mavericks and the Kings, who just have that one extra addition I thought they kind of needed. But the Suns just have a lot to prove this year, man. And I think I'm very excited, obviously, with their depth. Like you said, it does seem better than last year. There's not as many questions, obviously. But this team has a lot to prove to the fans next year, and it's going to be a lot on Devin Booker's shoulders and Kevin Durant's shoulders. So
Amen.
I just think it's going to be a long-ass season again. I don't think it's going to be
Always
as
is.
bad as last season, but it's going to be a long-ass season of hopefully joy. We'll see how it
Twists
goes.
and turns.
Oh,
and,
that's what I love. I
oh,
love that
man.
stuff.
All right, well, here we go. Going down the line, let's go from 15th to 1st. 15th, we both have the Portland Trailblazers. 14th, we both have the Utah Jazz. 13th, Matthew has the Pelicans. I have the Spurs. 12th, Matthew has the Spurs. I have the Lakers. 11th, Matthew has the Lakers. I have the Clippers. 10th, Matthew has the Clippers. I have the Rockets. 9th, Matthew has the Golden State Warriors. I have the New Orleans Pelicans slotted in there. 8th is where the Rockets live for Matthew, whereas that's where the Warriors live on my standings. 7th, Matthew has the Nuggets, where I have the Grizzlies. 6th, Matthew has the Minnesota Timberwolves. I have the Kings. 5th is where the Suns live for Matthew. 5th is where the Mavericks live for me. 4th is the Timberwolves for me and the Kings for Matthew. 3rd is the Grizzlies for Matthew, the Nuggets for me. 2nd's the Mavs for Matthew. 2nd's the Suns for me. And we both have the Oklahoma City Thunder as the first overall seed in the Western Conference. We'll post this on Twitter. Let us know what you think. We did it. We got through these predictions. It's going to be very, very fun at the back end of the season to have this, to pull this graphic up and just be like, well, we didn't see that coming, or whoa, who knew that trade was coming? And it's always fun.
Mine's very random, so I feel like I might have hit on a few more. So that's why I did that. I'm like, you know what? Because mine was totally opposite last year.
Yeah.
Like, let's just throw these in random order, dude, and see what happens.
Yeah,
look like a genius.
Let's not go chalk every time because chalk doesn't always work. All right. Well,
Yeah.
On that note, Jamsters, we appreciate you hanging out and watching us talk about different teams and slot them in different places. If you get a chance, head over to brightsideofthesun.com. We got a ton of great content going on there. We just finished up our player previews. I actually have a piece coming out, I think it's tomorrow, where I talk about one of my big concerns this season, and that is this is the second consecutive season in which Devin Booker's played out of position. He had to play point guard last year. He's going to have to play small forward this year, and that's going to be a challenge for him. And is that the right thing to do? Right? Like Devin Booker, prime player for the Phoenix Suns, and you're in 2 consecutive seasons having him play out of position. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. So my wife's standing behind the camera, like looking at her clock. So it's time to go. Matthew, you got anything to say?
No, go home and light your beam.
All right. Whoa.